Barry Trotter and the Shameless Parody by Michael Gerber, if that is their real name. Still not even a minor film. Utterly unauthorised and brazenly exploitative. We'll read out the blurb. 150,000 copies inexplicably sold in hardback. Hogwash is the most famous school in the wizarding world, and Barry Trotter is the most famous pupil. It's been that way ever since J.G. Rollins, Barry Trotter and the Philosopher's Stone, broke publishing records worldwide. So important has Barry become to the school's bottom line that it has been agreed that he can stay at Hogwash for as long as he likes. Barry Trotter is 22. Thank you very much for the follow, Dolphin Ziegler. How are you? Groupie-laden and scholarship-free, life has been good for the perpetual student, but now disaster looms. The movie Barry Trotter and the Inevitable Attempt to cash in has gone into production, and the marketing department at Wagner Bros. Is going into overdrive. Hogwash will be submerged under a tide of souvenir-crazed muddle fans, torn apart and sold on eBay, stone by messy stone. The movie must be stopped. Forget Lord Valumart. Barry, Ermine Kringer, and Lon Measley must try to defeat the most powerful force of grasping the sleazoids the world has ever known, Hollywood. Gerber has succeeded in creating a marginally grotesque, bouncing beauty of a throwaway tome. Down with Potter! Trotter is the real thing. By the Morning Star. Obligatory, so there's a little small print, where are we? Down the bottom there. Obligatory legal mumbo jumbo. This book has not been authorised or endorsed by J.K. Rowling or the publishers of the Harry Potter books. Harry Potter is a registered trademark of Warner Bros. Thank you. Now buy this book. I'm already sold. I was sold by the title. Just to show you the artwork there. He's reading Barry Trotter and the Philosopher's Stone. Fabulous. Alright. Barry Trotter and the Shameless Parody. Also by Michael Gerber. Are you there, God? It's me, Hitler. Harriet the Guy. I am the sleaze. Encyclopedia Brown gets punched hard. Barry Trotter and the Unnecessary Sequel. His Damaged Credit trilogy of The Golden Whoopass, Book 1, The Subtle Niche, Book 2, and The Amber Shot Glass, Book 3. I think I'm going to have to invest in some more Michael Gerber. Even before the what do they call it, the dedicated 2-bit, a message from the publisher of this book. While the authentic series may or may not be satanic, this book definitely is. It is poorly written, incredibly crass, and contains jokes about bodily functions that would embarrass a 5-year-old. It's been produced as cheaply as possible using highly toxic ink and substandard paper. Every corner has been cut, from eliminating every 500th word to employing copy editors fluent only in Spanish. This book exists solely to make the quick buck. A message from Satan. Oh no, you're not pinning this one on me. This book totally sucks. A message from the Universal Council of Churches. Any book so clearly loathed by Satan, the embodiment of all evil, logically must be the purest good. Otherwise, why would Satan hate it so? Therefore, I urge all right-thinking Christians, as well as people of goodwill from every other faith, to read this parody. A message from your little brother. This book is weird. I don't like it. Harry doesn't smoke. Smoking is for losers. And then the actual copyright. Blah, 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 blah. Anything else in here that might be fun? Barry Trotter and the Shameless Parody. Summary. Fans of the world's most popular children book are unfairly cheated after mistakenly purchasing a poorly written, obnoxious spoof. They form a vigilante group and track down the author, executing him in a particularly unpleasant way. I love it. I am so sold. To John and Kate and J.K. Rowling with impudent admiration. Impudent. Adults are just obsolete children, and to hell with them. Theodore Seuss Geisel, Dr. Seuss. Okay, so we've got... I believe my friend is back from the beer run. We have lived on. So there are 17 chapters and an epilogue. They don't look like big chapters, and the writing is not huge, so we may be able to get through a fair few chapters. So I'll stop between chapters or when it feels right, and we can talk about what we've just heard, or we can just have a chat away from the book and come back to it when the conversation dies down. We'll play it by ear. We're here to chill. Chapter 1. The Trouble with Muddles. The Hogwash School for Witches... start again. The Hogwash School for Wizards was the most famous school in the wizarding world, and Barry Trotter was its most famous student. His mere presence made sure that each year 20 candidates applied for every open spot, no matter how rapacious Hogwash's tuition became. As a result, Barry and the school had come to an unspoken agreement. Regardless of his grades, Barry could remain at Hogwash as long as he wished. He had just begun his 11th year. This arrangement made studying unnecessary, and turned each evening into a time of frenzied scholarship to one of relaxed contemplation of the day's events. There was also ample time for mischief. Sprawled sideways across the overstuffed chair in the gritty floor common room, in front of the cosy, multicoloured fire, Barry silently pitied the other students. And the teachers too, in fact. Anyone, in fact, who didn't have it as immaculately cushy as he did. Thank you very much. I need a bottle right now. He turned up the headphones, playing his favourite band, Valid Tumour Alarm, a group so deeply hostile that any song without the word kill in the title was automatically classified as a ballad. We collect our fear and turn it into a god, Barry read. I wonder what the hell that means. His mind began to wander, as it usually did when confronted with difficult thought. Thank you very much. Meals on Wheels. Putting down his copy of Existentialism for Beginners, he pulled his wizard pipe from his pocket. He had bought it last week in Catty Corner, a magical shopping district down in London. Barry thought it would give him an air of mystery and maturity, and only things that perpetual student status did not confer. Girls seemed to agree, well, muddle ones at least. Wizard pipes were leagues better than the muddle version. They weren't addictive, nor did they lead to a galloping mouth rot. They also never had to be filled. Barry clenched the little wonder between his teeth. Colibri! The pipe lit itself, and a skein of smoke curled upwards. The bowl was made of the finest magical meerschaum, which, as advertised, began to carve itself into an exact replica of its owner. Cool, said Barry, taking it out for a second to look at the forming portrait. There was even a tiny pipe sticking out of the portrait's mouth, on which Barry supposed an even smaller portrait was forming. Boy, a thought like that could break your brain. Barry coughed. He had never actually lit the pipe before, preferring to use it simply as a prop. Besides playing with the smoke, he couldn't figure out the appeal. His mouth tasted like he was chewing tree bark, and the smoke was fun. Wizard pipe smoke could be formed into any shape you wanted. Barry gave himself a sombrero, an arrow through the head, and a devil horns in quick succession. As he puffed, Barry could see the book's already slim chance at a newly newly buried medal quite literally going up in smoke. Well, he thought, if I'm screwed already, I might as well have some fun. Bloody! An ash spilled into his lap. He brushed frantically, but it was too late. A small hole had been burned into his father's old cape of invisibility. Damn, Barry said. I'd better put this bugger out before it sets me on fire. The pipe extinguished itself, and Barry slipped it into his pocket, then pitched his book into the fire. It was magical. So it screamed. Oh, oh, oh. Belching up a little institutional-grade rice pudding, Barry slipped on his cape of invisibility and walked towards the front door of Hogwash. He was the epitome of laziness, except when it came to getting into trouble, making a little money, or both at once. He delighted in seeing how far he could push old Bumblemore, and the rest. His first few terms had been pleasant, in that, oh look, there's that famous kid sort of way, sort of ogling and jockeying for his approval. The occasional theft of his knickers and speedy resale of the same on eBay. But then, in exchange for a few £100, some Giorno friends of his mother, aunt and uncle wrote a couple of, mostly fictional, books about his life. Then things got interesting. Near the front door, almost brainless Bill glided by, dragging his cerebellum and spinal cord behind him like a child's pool toy. It left a trail of spectral slime. Barry took care not to bump into the spirit and arouse suspicion, although the last time he did, he uttered a soft moo, and ever since Bill had believed that an invisible ghost cow walked the halls of the school. I shuddered to think what heinous circumstances led to her spirit's imprisonment in these dank halls. Murder, perhaps? Or a doomed love affair? Bill had said at dinner a few days later, while Barry pulled a stomach muscle, trying not to laugh. Dear. Right. Outside of the school now, he moved through the muddy, smelly crowd of youngsters with a quick step. He could never get used to the rankness that assaulted him every evening. Were everybody's fans this gross? It was not merely an unpleasant ripeness born of too many people living too close together with no sanitation facilities, but a pervasive, penetrating, unnerving funk that seemed to suggest a wildly held organic disorder. Tonight, the telltale stench of roast centaur also hung in the air, mixed with the aftertaste of pipe tobacco. It was unspeakably horrid. He coughed and spat to get the smell out of his mouth. The gobbet landed on a small, thin, bespectacled girl who sat cross-legged on the patch of dirt rereading a worn copy of Barry Trotter and the Philosopher's Scone. There's I don't know what you call it, like a little number 1 and then explanation at the bottom. So, further information. This book was released as Barry Trotter and the Magic Biscuit in America. Yeah, it was. As readers of the first book, no, the Philosopher's Scone contained the elixir of life, making anyone who ate it immortal. This is not to be confused with the elixir of lust, which makes people immoral. Big difference. Anyway, the Philosopher's Scone seemed like a great career opportunity to the evil Lord Valuemart, who considered compound interest and only power greater than himself, gaining immortality, gave the investment strategy buy and hold a whole new meaning. Anyway, after Barry thwarted Valuemart, Bumblemore knocked the pastry in his desk. He meant to throw it out, but eventually a mouse got to it and became immortal. The other mice logically proclaimed him the Messiah, and ever since a dangerous cult has been growing inside the walls of the wainscoting Hogwash. Carrying on. So he's just gobbed on some poor girl. She felt her hair, then looked skywards. Barry laughed. If only she knew, she'd never wash her hair again. Barry reached the forsaken forest. At a clearing just inside it stood Halfwid. The school's giant gamekeeper, surrounded by 20 or so women of all sizes and complexions. 2 centaurs, Thelonious and Bird stood talking to Halfwood, smoking tiny cigarettes. Seldom without berets and never without shades, centaurs are the hipsters of the magical world. Barry slipped off his cloak, and in all the muddle, females gasped at once. He never tired of that. Well, well, Slim's here to get some slickum on that hand gown, Felonius said. Hey, T-Bird, slip me some hoof. Who's out there on the spit? That there Diz. Never did care for him. What? Thelonious looked over his sunglasses at Barry. Jamf, if you ask me. What are they talking about? Time for us cats to split, said Bird, and he and Thelonious adjusted their berets and centaured into the woods. In the distance, and a lone bongo drum could be heard. Barry turned to the giant gamekeeper. Thanks, Halfwood, old buddy, he said, flipping a coin to the king-sized oaf who fumbled it. You know the drill. Go hang out with your pet Bogarts. More information. A Bogart is a shapeshifter that takes the form of your worst fear, personified by your least favourite actor. Okay. For an hour or two. Halfwood picked up the coin and bit it. Thanks, Barry. And stumbled uncertainly into the forest, clutching a bottle wrapped in a brown paper. Another night, another gaggle of groupies. By now, it bored Barry stiff, but in some weird way, it now reminded himself he was a celebrity, somebody special. And he rationalised, talk about giving back to your fans. Okay, girls, line up for your delousing spell, and then we can get started. Did everyone remember to wash? The next morning at breakfast, Barry was describing his exploits in graphic detail to a group of rat sycophants. As was customary, they were showered with well-deserved disapproval from Hogwash's female contingent, just as particularly indignant fifth year named Penelope Bluggs, who was preparing an itching madness spell on the morning the owls arrived. Everyone quickly covered their glasses and bowls from the flurry of feathers and mites and such that accompanied every delivery. Owls were a filthy way to deliver the mail, I agree. Barry got a letter from the headmaster. He showed it to the group. Maybe it's good news. Maybe old Snipes got cancer of the wand. Oh, said Manuel Rodriguez, a third year who will not reappear, but who's shoehorned in so that not everybody in this story was white, middle class, and British. Nice. Not likely. It's a yowler. Barry opened it. See me immediately, it boomed, and bring that good-for-nothing Lon with you. There were scattered giggles, which Barry silenced with a mean look and trademark gesture. Lon Measley, Barry's boon companion, was indeed good for nothing, or very little at least. He had suffered a tragic quiddit accident during fifth year. A basher had whiffed on a brainer, causing it to lodge in Lon's noggin at great speed. All attempts to remove the ball had caused it to work its way further. It finally came out the other side, so that Lon's head had a peephole pushed through it about the size of a £1 coin. When the wind hit it just right, it whistled. Nurse Pomfret had jerry-rigged him a new brain, using the barely adequate faculties of a hastily euthanized golden retriever. Lon was left with capacities of a dim, good-natured 7-year-old, and some definite canine tendencies. Come on, Barry said, distracting Lon from the eternal quest to lick himself. Fuzzface wants to see us. Lon smelled worse than usual. Have you been rolling in raccoon poop again? Lon also chased cars. On the other hand, he was extremely loyal. Penelope's itching madness spell thwacked on the wall behind them as they left the room. Pigs! She yelled. Alpo Bumblemore shuffled the cards as he watched the Woodstock-like scene below. He picked a card. Ace of clubs? No, damn. There had been a tent city of the most unattractive sort on the lawn of Hogwash for weeks now, ever since someone had published directions to the school in the Stun. The stunningly insipid was the paper's motto. Insipid? Yes. One it lived up to, or more accurately down to, every day. Its primary claim to fame was that the women in its pages were computer-enhanced, so as to appear naked. This did wonders for circulation, except when Margaret Thatcher made news. Anyway, Hogwash's lawn had been churned into ankle-deep muck almost immediately by the masses of stun-reading, Barry-loving muddles encamped upon it. Bumblemore grimaced as someone brazenly relieved themselves in the lake. He mumbled a word, and then a small, lamprey-like sea monster attached itself to the offending part. "That'll teach you," Bumblemore said aloud. Bumblemore heard a splash. Muddles had been pushing each other off Hogwarts High Cliff at the rate of 5 an hour. The resident kraken was eating well. One of its tentacles held up an encouraging placard saying, "Jump!" Unfortunately, this didn't thin their numbers. More fans were arriving every day. Stop for a drink. Hippies, the headmaster thought, seeing a pair of fans making the book with 2 covers in the grass. Drug addicts, D&D players, he'd turn them all to cinders if he could. Even the ones who were just bookish kids with a weakness for hero worship and savvy merchandising. But there were a fair number of adults in the crowd too, perhaps fans of the books, perhaps Manson-like wolves moving among the sheep. "Oh well," he said, "God protects drunks, blondes and muddles." An ace fell from Bumblemore's voluminous sleeve. "There you are, you rascal." "Is this about the girls, or selling the map, or something else I did but forgot?" Barry wondered, as he and Lon climbed the crumbling stairs to Bumblemore's office. If it was a map, nobody could blame him. He needed that money. His godfather, Sirius Black, had sunk his entire inheritance into a harebrained scheme which failed, and Harry had long since burned through the money that J.G. Rollins gave him for telling his life story. A whole summer in the Muddle world, and its dimly encrusted armpit, no less, required many cigarettes and much lager to endure. But Bumblemore wouldn't buy that. He wanted Barry to shove off last year. "Nobody ever in the history of Hogwash has been held back for 5 years in a row," he yelled it. "Nobody ever in the history of Hogwash has been held back for 5 years in a row," he had yelled. "Trotter, you're a disgrace. I know you're doing it on purpose. All this publicity has turned you into a comically lazy, slightly magical slacker. Do us all a favour and switch over to the dark side. They'll never recover." The musty old wizard was right, and Barry would be the first to admit it. But who could blame Barry for staying a student? He was a king here, a god, famous, surrounded by the easy marks who were all too willing to loan cars, do laundry, or any other favour that the great Barry Trotter wanted. Life can only go downhill from here, he thought. At least from Barry's perspective, the latest scam had worked out brilliantly. Not only had he been well paid for the map, but now he had a ragtag, fetid mob for his fans encamped on the Hogwash front lawn. No instructor dared fail him with a 5,000-strong pro-Trotter Vandal army so close at hand. However, even he was beginning to get a little annoyed. Their constant moronic chants of love added sonic unpleasantness to the visual element so amply supplied by their unsafe, rickety lean-tos and unimaginably tatty appearance. They were obnoxious and smelly, and they had discovered Halfwood still, and the mass brawling had begun. Halfwood's liquor supply was nothing any sane person would mess with. If Halfwood didn't get you, the jet-fueled like spirits would. An apologetic Jeroboam of magic 900 proof brandy patched things up, between him and Barry at least. Halfwood still despised the Muddles, and they seemed to know it somehow, singling him out for a torment. Halfwood's blast-ended brutes sent a few intruders to the hospital, and some others went blind from drinking raw alcohol. But Barry knew he had fans to burn. Dude. Boy, these stairs were taking a long time. I wish this narration would hurry up, he said. Lon whimpered in incoherent agreement. As they approached the door to Bumblemore's office, they were dive-bombed by a flock of pickpocketing bats lurking in the shadows. Whatever booty those thieving marsupials got, they took back to Gritty Floor's rival house, Silverfish, and woe betide any student who tried to get anything back. They didn't mess with Barry, but Lon was his favourite target, since he often carried old food in his pockets. Waving their arms frantically, they ran towards Bumblemore's door. It opened automatically. Trotter! Barry and Lon stopped, and the door swung shut. Barry panted. Professor, I just want you to know that I was interviewing all those girls for the school newspaper. Bumblemore turned. He looked very fed up. Trotter, you know very well we don't have school paper, and if Muddle girls have bad judgment to let you within 50 feet of them, they deserve what they get. This is altogether more serious. Come over to the window. The pair looked down at the chanting, moshing mass of mud-covered Muddledom. There were thousands of them, and not a porta-potty in sight. The smell was almost visible, like heat coming off a road. Look at these mutton heads. It's like a bloody resistance fair down there, Bumblemore grumbled. Do you know I had to deliver a baby this morning? Very messy business. Muddle birth. They named it Barry, of course. I was so appalled I nearly threw up on it. Barry leaned out the window, which galvanised the crowd. A great ragged cheer rose up. Misspelled banners unfurled. Go away! Barry yelled. He says we can stay, said a Muddle. Hurrah! Hurrah! For Barry Trotter! Idiot! Bumblemore spat at the hero. Now we'll never be rid of them. He grabbed Barry's elbow. Get away from that window before you do more damage. Quick as a flash, Bumblemore licked his thumb, raised Barry's fringe and rubbed the scar on his forehead. The mark in the shape of an interrobang. Okay, more information here. In the Muddle world, the interrobang is a failed piece of punctuation. Half question mark, half exclamation mark. As in, what the hell was that? Or, I just ate what? Being both chronically confused and easily excitable, Barry's mother felt an affinity with the interrobang. Thus, Barry was marked with one. What did I get up to? The mark in the shape of interrobang was a result of Barry's battle with Lord Valuemart while he was an infant. It was also his proof of wizarding greatness, and Bumblemore was convinced it was a mistake. Get off, Barry said, pushing the mothball and patchouli-scented mid-magi git away. They turned to see Lon putting the small end of Bumblemore's telescope into his mouth. Since the accident, Lon was a great gnawer. Lon, no! Lon, startled, knocked over a tin of magic ants, which spilled all over the floor. They began to spell out dirty words. The aged headmaster struggled to control his temper. Look, you two, I want you to listen, so you can get the blazes out of my office. There you go. In the corner, Bumblemore's pet phoenix, Sparky, flickered as it pecked at an asbestos cuttlebone. Bumblemore brandished a copy of The Stun. Someone, I suspect the latest... is this speech? Someone, I suspect the latest odious issue of the Malfian malfeasance clan, currently oozing all over the Silverfish house. Barry hoped his relief didn't show. Has given this paper the directions to hogwash. Ergo, these pinheads down there, he threw the stun at the wastepaper basket with great force. I am getting entirely too old for this pile of fumets. With the threat of punishment receding, Barry's mind had wandered. Hello, dog. His eyes played over the tiles in Bumblemore's bookshelves. In Bumblemore's bookshelves. She wore a golden whip, Miss Harriet's torture closet, and Barry's favourite, Prisoner at Women's College, or the Private Diary of Phineas Batman Pullet, Flagellant. The first year Barry had been shocked. 11 years later, he was just amused. Bumblemore had an odd idea of fun, but who doesn't? The slap of paper against the wastepaper shook Barry from his reverie, and he heard Bumblemore say, "Our deceptive spells are useless. It takes basic intelligence to be deceived, and those knuckleheads simply ain't got. How could someone do something like that? And for what? A bit of money?" Barry snorted derisively, laying it on thick. "There's more to life than money. I always say that, don't I, Lon?" "Yep," Lon sputtered, a spindle of drool sliding from his chin. "God, what a dolt you are, Measley." Bumblemore paused for a moment, eyes closed, squeezing the bridge of his nose, and then said, "Pardon me, this infernal chanting has given me a splitting headache. As bad as things are right now, they may get much worse. Much worse. And today's daily's soothsayer is right." He grabbed the paper off the desk and handed it to Barry. "Poop," spelled out the ants. "What?" "Sex grades for scandal rocks academic world?" Barry asked, reading the headline. "No, below that. New penalties for sodomy called unimaginably draconian." "Let me see that," Bumblemore exclaimed, grabbing the paper back. He scanned it in vain. Barry had made that one up. "You think you're so funny," Bumblemore groused. He jabbed at the article. "That one. Brit Whiz Flick Picked to Click," Barry read. "All the Tinseltown is buzzing about the movie. Barry Trotter and the inevitable attempt to cash in. Slated for a release in just 1 month. Fans of the children's fantasy series are expected to mob theatres worldwide. Wagner Brothers is betting on the big-budget biopic, hoping that an all-out promotional and merchandising blitz will make the movie a massive international hit, even bigger than the published phenomenon that spawned it. "I don't understand," Barry said. "This seems like it can only help hogwash. You know what they say, no publicity is bad publicity." Bumblemore smacked his forehead at Trotter's stupidity, and as he did so, a single blue moth skittered upwards from his robes. "Trotter, you are a fool. How many kids actually read books these days? 1 in 10? 100? And yet look outside." As he pulled aside the curtain, a handful of something hit the window. It wasn't mud. "We want Barry!" the crowd yelled. Bumblemore made a rude gesture at the crowd, which booed him lustily. "Do you have any idea how many people will show up here after the movie? Adding in overseas, home video and DVD rentals, maybe 100 million people will see it. That means we'll have 500,000 people of all ages fighting, singing, bleeding and God knows what else on our lawn by Boxing Day." "Uh-oh," the ants spell out, until Lon, giggling, decimated the last H with his foot. The enormity of it broke in Harry's mind, and a trickle of sweat rolled down his scalp. Why not just move hogwash? Magically, I mean. "Insurance," Bumblemore said. "Our lawyers at Warlock and Wyvern tell me it would break us to move. We might as well close the school altogether and go back to correspondence courses. Anyway, since you're the cause of all this, I want you to fix it. Stop that movie, Barry Trotter, or hogwash is history. But if Malfeasance... Okay, Malfeasance was the one who... said Barry shamelessly. His parents are trustees, Bumblemore said. Your parents are mulch. Okay. This could be my next book, Barry thought. Mental cash registers ringing. I'll call JG and... No. It was that kind of thinking that had gotten him into this mess. Can Lon help? And Ermine? As our only special ed student, I doubt you very much Lon will be missed. The experience may be good for him. Miss Cringer is teaching at Remedial Wizard School outside Hogsmeade. Whether she can help or not is up to her. A knock came at the door, and Halfwit stumbled in. As usual, he was wearing a battered baseball cap advertising a brand of dragon feed. Professor Bumblemore, some of those muddles have broken into my cabin again. They're pouring through my smalls. Halfwit's smalls were as big as a pup tent. Can I kill him? Son of a witch, Bumblemore muttered. No, Halfwit, I'll handle it. He moved to the door and turned back and said in an almost fatherly way, Barry, the school is depending on you. If you ever get into a tight spot and think you might not be able to stop the movie, I want you to remember one thing. He puts his hand on Barry's shoulder. If Hogwash closes, you'll have to get a job. Then he and Halfwit left. Lon scooped a handful of ants into his mouth, leaving the SHI on the carpet. Yuck, he said, sticking out his tongue. My thoughts exactly, said Barry. End of chapter 1. Chapter 2. The Butcher of Hogwash. After corralling the profane ants, Barry and Lon left Bumblemore's study. They made quite sure the door was locked. The last time that Sparky got loose, most of the Puff and Stuff house were reduced to charred rubble. For something that was mostly mouldy rock, these old castles sure could burn. Lucky for the boys, most of the larcenous bats had fallen into the light slumber, and a few that were still awake were preoccupied with smoking cigarettes, looking tough and trying to rob each other. Barry and Lon tiptoed past, leaving them to their fluttery squabbling. As readers of Barry Trotter and the Chamber Pot of Secrets already know, Bumblemore often answered nature's call by means of amazingly lifelike porcelain reproduction of Barry's head. Bumblemore had placed it in the hall for the house elf to empty. As if radar guided, Lon's shin upended it, knocking it down the stairs with a splash and smash. This roused the bats and flew at them. Run! Barry yelled. Barry spied a door slightly ajar down the hall. Quick, in here! He cried, and Lon piled in behind him. They both regretted it immediately. Oh, God! Barry said. Of all the rooms to pick, it was the dreaded Upper South bathroom, home to one of Hogwash's least favourite spirits, flatulent Fanny. Who's out there? A quavering high-pitched voice came from one of the stalls. The air was rank with the fruits of Fanny's ghostly intestine. Oh, Fanny moaned, as another gastric salvo sputtered to light. Go away, I feel sick. You, said Lon, pinching his nose. Blap, Fanny replied. Fanny, whatever you're eating, stop, Barry yelled, breathing through his mouth. The bats outside beat their tiny bodies against the door in Morse code for stupidity. Don't yell at me! Everyone hates me. But it's not my fault, Fanny said weakly. I'm lactose intolerant. Brr. Fanny was a first year who had died in 1952 after some silverfish third years hid a massive amount of cheese in her dinner one evening. As she crampily met her maker, she swore vengeance, and each of the bullies were driven mad by a mysterious invisible stench which trailed them wherever they went. No breeze could move it, no soap could remove the sulphurous signature of Fanny's unhappy gut. Death was the only relief. After her tormentors had done away with themselves, Fanny took up residence in the bathroom where she had expired. Ironically, locking first years in with Fanny had become a favourite trick of Hogwash's bullies. Slowly, the beating of the bats stopped. Barry opened the door a crack, letting a trickle of sweet fresh air in. The coast was clear. "Okay, Lon, let's go," he said. "See you, Fanny." "Nobody likes me," Fanny said. The rest of her sentence was obscured by an abdominal outburst. As Lon and Barry turned the corner, they were suddenly confronted by one of Hogwash's most colourful denizens, the semi-feral Miss McGoogle. Once leader of the gritty floor and the productive member of the Hogwash faculty, the now spectacularly unkempt Miss McGoogle had been unhinged by the constant stream of dramatic events that Trotter and his cronies had unleashed upon the school. After years of mayhem, from Lord Valumart's constant clumsy attempts to do away with Barry, to Ferd and George, with a J, Measley's endless barrage of asinine pranks, and now finally the appearance of the unwashed masses at the school's very gates, her hyper-orderly mind snapped. Overnight, the formidable Miss McGoogle turned into a world-class nutter, skulking around the school dressed in discarded flour sacks, subsisting somehow on the leavings in student trash cans. It was a medical miracle she had lasted this long. People whispered that Bumblemore kept her in a secret sex dungeon, where the wizened, balmy pervert aired a set of privates too wrinkly to contemplate. Once quite powerful wizard, Miss McGoogle now transformed into a cat only when she went into heat, which at her age was blessedly seldom. "Boo!" Harry wheezed out of breath. The addlepated woman hissed, spraying Barry with her sour-smelling spit, and spun on her heel. She skittered away, her long toenails clicking double-time down the corridor. The bats reversed direction and followed her. A stupid choice, since she had nothing but her wits and precious few of those. Barry and Lon heard her footfalls recede, and then what sounded like a crash as La McGoogle careened into some metal because of the Spanish thing. McGoogle careened into some metal something some distance away. "Barry, how long will we be gone?" Lon asked. "Stopping the movie? I don't know." "Because I want to get my hat from my room." "Good thinking," Barry said. Lon's hat, a double-coned Laplander, knit cap with a reindeer on it, was essential for their trip to the model world. Its ample flaps covered the hole through his head, and muffled its cheery bottle-like note. "Before we do that, though," Barry said, "I'd like to stop by Zed's." Zed Grimford was Hogwash's armourer, an ex-error fired by the Ministry after killing too many muddles in his war against the Earth Eaters. Zed had always held it against Barry that he'd ever made it into the books. Never made it into the books. He fancied himself the very role model of a tough action star. Barry didn't blame J.G. Rollins for not putting him there. Zed was a paragon of bad judgment, a parent's nightmare, pure sales poison. Crude, quick to fight, incredibly hostile, and the palest caricature of Zed would instantly remove the series from school libraries all over the world. Heck, Zed was too intense for Barry, the guy who regularly doled out noogies to the Dark Lord. As written, the Trotter series was strictly PG rated, and old Zed was an ostentatious 18. Excessive violence and adult situations. There's more information here somewhere. Where did it come? Sorry. So after the Earth Eaters bit, we had an extra bit that says they were called this because Lord Valimart made them eat copious amounts of dirt as proof of their loyalty. Okay. If he ever veered into X, Barry didn't want to know. "Why do we need to see Zed?" Lon asked. He was afraid of Zed to the point his pants wetting, which it must be admitted came a lot easier to Lon than most. "Because if we tell him what we're doing, perhaps he'll give us something helpful," Barry said. "Or something we can sell." "For gum?" Lon loved chewing gum. Yes, possibly. Goody, said Lon, then paused. But what are we doing, Barry? Didn't you listen to Bumblemore? We're going to stop the movie. How? Lon asked. Barry didn't know, so he made something up. We're going to kidnap J.G. Rollins, Barry said. Oh, Lon said. Barry and Lon's ears had not deceived them. Mrs. McGoogle had crashed into a haunted suit of armour. Its ghost was picking up the pieces, grumbling all the while. Blamed fleshies. They think they can just run into people, no respect for the dead. Behind the ghost stood the door which had the brass plate reading Z. Grimford, Armourer. Excuse us, Barry said, pushing past the flimsy piece of display armour to the side with his foot. Watch it, the ghost said, petulantly. That's me home you're kicking. Mr. Grimford, Barry said, knocking normally. It's Barry Trotter and Lonald Measley. The whine and grind of the heavy machinery could be heard. Then, after there was no answer, he pounded on the door, shouting, Mr. Grimford! Or Grimfood. Barry and Lon heard the machinery abruptly cut off, and then heard Zed's girlishly high voice cry out, Back ye devils! Don't know what accent that was supposed to be. The door opened, and there stood Zed, all 6 foot 9 inches of him. He was a big, hairy man with a long, red, forked beard. His facial hair was so impressive that he made the frizzy Bumblemore look like a piker. In addition to his forked beard, Grimford had forked sideburns, and his head hair was separated into many tufts, each tied with a small ribbon which stuck out like a child's drawing of a sun. The whole effect was kind of piratey, with heavy overtones of bizarro sexuality. Barry shuddered to contemplate. His bear-like bulk was covered in a smudged denim apron, and he beat back a swarm of translucent pixies with a freckled paw. They dodged it easily, snickering and taunting. Why, if it isn't Trotter and Lon, come in. Oh wait, he's high-pitched, isn't he? Why, if it isn't Trotter and Lon, come in. Zed offered a greasy hand, which promptly crushed Harry's in a prehistoric show of dominance. He was holding a pink feather duster, which was apparently the source of all that racket. Hello, Sir Cyril, Zed said to the ghost. I see Cyclone McGoogle's been here. Some people shouldn't have bodies, Sir Cyril said, his arms full of armour. Some people aren't responsible enough. Quite, said Zed. Oh. And closed the door. Pillow biter, Zed mumbled to himself. Don't mind the pixies, he said to the boys. That curse is a royal pain, it is. He tossed the two a pair of plastic safety goggles. Please put these on, Zed said. They like to lay their eggs in the fluids of your eyes. Ah! Barry and Lon squinted immediately and scrambled to put on the glasses. Professor Snipe, Hogwash's evil-tempered professor of notions, had given Zed a chronic case of the pixies after a dust-up several years ago. Nobody would lift the curse for fear of crossing Snipe, and it really curtailed Zed's success with the ladies. The dumb little pixies smacked onto their safety goggles instantly. You got so as you didn't even see it. What? I see you're still wearing your glasses, Barry, Zed said. I wish you'd let me do something about that. Zed had offered many times to make Barry a new pair of magical all-zinc eyeballs. Barry sensibly had declined. Grimford stood in his fluorescently lit concrete-floored workroom, surprisingly up-to-date for Hogwash, where the plumbing and wiring were quintessentially English. Bumblemore was constantly calling the house elves in to fix this or that, but they were unionised and often on strike, so everybody had to learn and accept unflushing toilets and small electrical fires, and incredibly unflushing spark-throwing toilets as part of life. As extra information. It must be admitted that Hogwash was crumbling in no small part thanks to Bumblemore's terrifying ineptitude as a fundraiser. It was difficult under any circumstances, since the most trustees were pals of Value Mart, because let's face it, you can't amass a sizable fortune without being at least a little dork. Yeah, I read that right. But Bumblemore's tendency to give more bothersome of the old one-finger salute kept the trustees at a constant state of near revolt. They were, in fact, secretly funding the revolutionary mice. Zed wiped his hands across his apron, which was so smudged with grease and blood, I'm sure it looked like it, that they'd come back dirtier than before. There, stretched out on Zed's work table, utterly defenceless, was a blown-up sex doll. It wasn't very high quality. Barry would bet that at least 30 seconds under Zed's writhing bulk. Barry lifted a deflated arm. "What are you doing with your friend here, Zed?" Barry asked. "Dusting?" "Put that down," Zed said testily. "That's personal, that is." He grabbed it and stuffed it into a box. "You really don't pay attention in class, do you, Trotter? This isn't a feather duster. It's an enchantomatic." He took his wand from behind his ear to fit it into the end of the duster. "This focuses the magic juice. Then you get whatever object you want to enchant." And he fished a boar's bollocks brew bottle cap from its pocket. It's a brand. Boar's bollocks brew bottle cap from his pocket and placed it on the table. Put the duster directly over it, and there was a flash and a smell of ozone. "It's enchanted." The bottle cap gave a squeak and began to hop about, bending itself in half like a mouth with every jump. Zed squashed it with a meaty fist. It gave a little shriek, then moved no more. Lon felt sad. Barry felt sorry for the latex lady fated to play the Pinocchio to Zed's booty-starved Geppetto. In the best public school tradition, there was something about Hogwash that encouraged kinkiness. All those rules, all those teenagers' hormones. The students usually came out okay, but the staff were all strange, sexually and otherwise, almost without exception. "What can I do for you, boys?" Lon jumped right in. "We're going to kidnap somebody." This explains nothing for Zed, who looked at Barry puzzled. "We've got to go out into the muddle world, well, maybe even to America, to prevent some people from making a movie about me," Barry said, feeling unsure that he wouldn't be in his project either, or the helpfulness drained from Zed's manner. "Well, I can't see how a lonely Hogwash armourer can help you with that," Zed said. "Now, if you'll excuse me, I have this lollipop to disarm." He picked up what appeared to be a standard lollipop. It was covered in foreign writing, and through a gap in the wrapper, Barry could see the candy was fiery orange. Lon's eyes brightened. "Oh, can I have it?" "No, Lon," Zed replied, smiling at him. "It could be lethal. Your rascally brothers left it in their secret candy stash by the Iron Maria on the second floor, and the third year found it, almost ate it too. No telling what could have happened to them," Zed said. Barry agreed. Eating any candy that passed through the hands of Ferd and George Measley was a bad idea. He remembered the sweets they'd passed out to the first years a few years back. Camouflaged as delicious chocolate truffle, it caused monarch butterflies to hatch in your guts and stream out of your bottom. It was marvellous. Zed stepped towards the door. "I'll be up all night as it is, so if you'll excuse me—" "Wait, Mr. Grimford, listen," said Barry, concocting a suitable lie. "The reason we've got to stop the movie is that we've seen the screenplay and, well, it gets it all wrong. Certain people are missing. Important people," Zed brightened. "And we are going to make sure they're in it and get the recognition that they deserve." "Well, in that case," Zed tried to conceal his upsurge of interest by using the muscle in his right ear to pop the wand nestled behind it into the air, then catching it with his hand. This nervous habit was impressive enough in the first time he saw it, but after a whole semester of magical shock, it was simply irritating. "What can I do for you?" What a sucker, Barry thought, and reeled into him. "We need some things for our mission, things to help us if the going gets rough." "How about this saw?" Zed said, hoisting an 8-foot silver halberd into the air. "You can flip a switch here on the handle, and..." The blade at the pole's end began to whirl an awful buzz. Step for a drink. "The best saw in the world. Cuts through anything," Zed shouted. "This will persuade those Hollywood types." Lon, smiling broadly, hands clasped over his ears, hopped up and down. Loud noises excited him. Barry did not share his enthusiasm. "No thanks," he shouted. "We need something smaller, more concealable." "Suit yourself," Zed said. Distracted by the racket, he put the saw down before switching it off. It was as good as advertised, cutting through the floor effortlessly with a spray of concrete chips. There was a scream from the classroom below. Zed yanked it backwards, then switched it off. "Sorry," he yelled. "Turn it on again," Lon said. He was ignored. "Zed, do you have anything concealable?" "I've got a thigh holster for your wand. Helps if you're ever frisked. Want it?" "Sure," said Barry. Zed tossed it to him. It was leather. It had a nude woman clumsily tooled onto it. "What about something that looks like a muddle but isn't?" Zed reached a furry red arm into his apron pocket. He pulled out a pack of gum. "How about this?" "All right," Lon hollered excitedly. "Now we don't have to sell—" "Shut up, Lon," fearing what Zed would catch on to his fencing scheme. "Toss it over. Wait, it isn't going to explode or anything." "No, there's pity. No more, the pity." What? Zed tossed it to Barry. It looked like gum. It smelled like spearmint. "It will clear out any room, however. It's tear gas gum. Chew a piece, then breathe on somebody. They'll make way in a hurry." Barry was instantly charmed. He could get into real trouble with this. "Great," he said. "Got anything else?" Zed opened a many-drawer standing chest. Started rooting around. "It's the beginning of term, so I don't have much. Serious putty. Copyright. You don't want that. Magic slugs? You mean like for slot machines?" Barry asked, hopefully thinking about of a detour to Vegas. "No, I mean like for gardens." "What do they do?" Barry asked, crestfallen. "They write your name in slime, very slowly. It's quite amusing if you have an afternoon to kill. Entirely non-lethal, though. What about this? Loyal jelly." He turned around and tossed what looked like toothpaste tube to Barry. Barry opened it and squeezed a little onto his fingertip. He immediately felt the sensation of being tongue-kissed on the finger. "It's useful stuff, made by the species of super affectionate bee. There's nothing that jelly won't do for you." "But what can it do for you?" Barry asked. "Stops leaks, protects your skin from heat or cold. Say you have to fish a piece of toast out the toaster, squirt a little jelly on your hand, and they'll gladly burn to death to protect your fingers of the ones they love." Not really convinced of the product's usefulness, Barry tucked it into his pocket anyway. "Thanks, Ed." As the adults talked, Lon was down the hall on all fours, his nose at the mouse hole sniffing. Suddenly, a needle flew out of the hole, trailing a thread. It hooked on Lon's collar, and there was a tiny cheer from inside the hole. Lon was so startled by this that he sprang to his feet and backed away. An old-fashioned roller skate, scrounged from somewhere, emerged from the hole, carrying 7 mice. Lon turned and began to run. "What else do you have?" Barry asked. "I mean, if you can spare it, we'll take good care of anything you can give us." "Ah!" Lon yelled, running past, trailing a zigzagging skate full of cheering mice. "Not if you're using it right, he won't," Zed laughed. Still running around the room, Lon realised that the skate was attached to his collar and began slapping at it. He dislodged the needle and the mice were sent. Their cheers now turned to screams, veering off into the wall. A few were injured, but none seriously. They weaved dizzily back to their hole, dragging the skate behind them. Zed continued to root around the nicked and spattered cabinet. Here, I'll never open this, but it's good for incapacitating a muddle or two. He tossed around a brown and silver tin to Barry. A round brown silver tin to Harry, who read, Flemberry Farms Snot Chocolate. He flipped it over. Inside this tin is the world's finest snot chocolate. This savoury drink, a secret Flemberry family recipe, combines the richest, most finely milled cocoa available with an impossibly powerful industrial strength expectorant. Just one sip and you'll be saying, my sinuses are packed solid. Your nose will run, gallop, and you'll be hawking up fistfuls of creamy sputum for hours. Anytime massive bogey time with Snotberry Farms. I realise this is incredibly gross, Zed, but how could it help? Zed didn't look up. It will distract your assailant. Lon reached over. Smells like chocolate. Let me see. No, Lon, Barry said, whacking Lon lightly on the nose. Zed, what if I don't want to distract the muddles? What if I need to splatter one of them all over the place? Zed turned, his eyes lit with glee, and the thought of violence against muddles warmed Zed's heart. I've got just the thing. He pulled open the top drawer and pulled out a vicious-looking metallic pistol. Yes, Barry thought. Here's something I can pawn. A .357 Magnum. Police issue, nickel finish, snub nose for easy concealment. You could stop a manticore with this baby, purred Zed. He cocked it with a snap. Careful, it's loaded. He tossed it to Barry before Barry could fathom what a bad idea that was. Scared, Barry fumbled it, and they all dove for cover as it discharged. The bullet ricocheted, and in a 1,000,001 shot bounced cleanly through the new cut hole in the floor. A groan was heard, and then Professor Snipe's voice. Cyril Broadbottom, I remind you that no one can be shot in my classroom without permission. 5 points from Gritty Floor. Zed leaned over the hole and yelled, Sorry again, he grimaced. Oh, that looks like I can splatter wizards too. You guys better go before Snipe curses you. Thanks, Zed, Barry said, gathering up his loot. Wish us luck. What happened? Said Lon, still in his defensive cower. Nothing, Lon. Good luck with your kidnapping. Oh, nothing, Lon. Good luck with your kidnapping, said Zed. And Barry? Yes? If you can't stop it and they make the movie anyway, well, could you make sure George Clooney plays me? End of chapter 3. Chapter 2. We're about to start chapter 3. Cool. Right, so chapter 3. Mr. Barry's Wild Ride, and I am loving that they're sticking to the whole, like they used Spanish migrants to write the book, like underpaid. Google and Mr. Barry. Right, chapter 3. Mr. Barry's Wild Ride. Barry and Lon hurried out of Zed's office, just as real bedlam began to erupt. Now see here, Grimford, Snipe, okay. Now see here, Grimford, you can't go shooting one of my students, they heard the exasperated Snipe shout before they closed the door. They took off their goggles and placed them by the door. This place is an asylum, Barry said to Lon. Lon was unsure what the word asylum was, so he just smiled and nodded. It was amazing how far playing dumb could get you. He showed Barry the lollipop he had swiped off Zed's workbench in the commotion. Well, you are a measly brother, aren't you? Good work, but I wouldn't eat that if I were you. I can, Lon said belligerently. Okay, but ask Ferd and George first, okay? Barry asked. Do you have to get anything from your room before we go? Just my hat, said Lon. Right, Barry said. In addition to the essential flaps, Lon's hat had strings coming down that could be tied under his chin to keep the quasi-canine man-child's fuzz-covered jowls warm. But it was only September, and he was sure it would look strange. Barry had quit caring ages ago. "Okay, put that on, and get whatever else you want to bring, and I'll meet you at the portrait in 5 minutes," said Barry. Lon went, his meandering sort of gait unsullied by the sense of purpose. Barry headed towards his room. A first year, Basil Basingstoke, passed him in the hall, carrying a round container. This gave Barry an idea. "Hey, you! What's your name?" "But Basil," Basil stammered, shocked that the great Barry Trotter was speaking directly to him. "Yeah, Basil, give me that tin, would ya?" Barry said. "Oh, sure, Barry. I'd be glad to." Basil immediately dumped its contents on the floor. He collected buttons and handed it over. The buttons, enchanted, rolled away laughing, secreting themselves in every nook and cranny in the hallway. Basil would be rounding them up for hours. "Thanks, kid," Barry said, and continued walking to his room, knowing that Basil would gush to his friends about his chance encounter. When Barry opened the door, he was greeted by the usual disaster area, an unmade bed smelling of sweat, carelessly taped up posters of Reservoir Dogs, Bob Marley, and of course a life-size one of Art Vallimore, the singer of Valid Tumour Alarm, a broken lava lamp, a writing desk piled high with old assignments, angry letters, traffic tickets, bills and other trash, and his prized possession, a stolen street sign. Road crumbles away into the pit of hell, 5 kilometres. There were a few books on the shelves and in careless piles, some Camison He's never read, Salinger Kerouac, Vonnegut skimmed, Brautigan from where he suspected he was deep enough to write poetry. He wasn't. Lots of comics and a subscription to Viz. That was his godfather Sirius had gotten him into 10 years ago, which kept coming for some reason. And of course there was his faithful owl, Earwig, who sat grumbling in her cage. Earwig had been confined to Barry's room since he went for Dorco Malfeasance's soft bits 5 years ago, and as usual her cage was filthy. Barry's rule was don't clean it until her eyes water. Aww. Holding the fruitcake tin in his hand, he went over to Earwig's cage, opened the door, and folded the corners of the feces-loaded newspaper over the top, making a bundle. He then deftly slid the bundle into the tin, the pile's droppings was a little higher than the tin, but he scrunched the lid down super tight. It was so full he had to tape it shut. Barry laughed to himself. It's the little pleasures in life that make the difference. Taking some brown paper, he carefully wrapped the tin and began to address the parcel. He stopped. This mustn't be traceable, thinking of the muddled court orders that had been passed a few years ago. Waving his wand, he mumbled the ancient summoning spell. "Come here." His magic pen unearthed itself from its desk and flew over to him. It stood poised over the package until Barry spoke. "Mr. Vernon Dimsley, 4 Trivet Row, Piddlesex, England." And for the finishing touch, the return address was that of Uncle Vernon's boss. Barry smiled at the psychological damage he was about to inflict. Then, for some reason, he felt a tiniest twinge of conscience, which he squashed like a defenceless pixie. Though his friends had been threatening him with death for years, Barry had been tormenting the Dimsleys as well, and rightly so. First, he had driven the obese, sadistic son insane by placing an endless loop of dogs barking jingle bells in his head. Then he had given the missus a powerful sapphic crush on the Queen, which had the double benefit of not only ruining the Dimsleys' marriage — Vernon was driven into the arms of other even more shrewish and less attractive women — but also putting Mrs. Dimsley under 24-hour surveillance by MI5. To Barry's surprise, Vernon had proven to be the toughest of all three, like a cowpat baked rock hard by a white-hot sun of obtuseness. stolidity. Here, Earwig. Muddle post, please, Barry said, giving the owl the unpleasant task of ferrying her own droppings. But she was so glad to be free that she grabbed the twine in her talons without complaint and swooped out of the window. She circled back to give Barry a dirty look. However, he could have sworn that she stuck her tongue out at him. It was an inconvenient reality that his celebrity meant nothing to animals. They put up with less. Barry threw on his old army jacket, which was ratty, covered in ink blots, and the brief period when he'd used a fountain pen. From that brief period where he used a fountain pen because they made him feel smart. He checked the pockets for various necessities: pipe, lighter, bottle opener, gun, and walked out. Lon was waiting for him in front of the portrait at the gritty floored common room. Cap on, ready to go. He was holding a thick book. Lon can't read an adult book like that, Harry thought. Hey, Lon, what's that for? It's my journal, said Lon, in case we have adventures. Usually Barry was much too protective of his brand identity to allow such a thing, but since it was Lon, who was still stuck on the cursive Q, and therefore no threat to become an author, Barry decided not to be a sourpuss. After you, Barry said. I see London, I see France, Lon sung, and stepped into the painting, which obligingly lifted her hoop skirts and let him through. Barry followed, and the pair found themselves outside Hogwash. Barry threw the cape of invisibility over them both so that the masses of muddles milling about wouldn't see them. Unfortunately, Lon was considerably taller than Barry, so both their pairs of legs showed from the knee. Follow me, said Barry, heading to the Forsaken Forest. I keep going to call it the Foreskin Forest. Dang. Barry, I don't think you should see your girlfriends right now, Lon said with the particular moral intensity of a prepubescent. Shut up, stupid. We're going to get Ermine. How would you say that? Ermine or Ermine? Ermine. Lon was momentarily chastened, but soon lost himself in the myriad purgencies of the breeze. Barry made sure he and Lon stayed far away from the infamous buggering birch. Whenever anyone would stray too close, the loathsome plant would reach out and... No, it's just too disgusting to describe. How are we going to get to Hogsbleed? Lon asked. By Hedgerow, of course, said Barry replied. Muddle England was covered in rows of large hedges, certainly large enough to cover an underground railroad, especially if a little space-warping magic were applied. The wizarding community of England used this as their primary way to get around. Barry had forced J.G. Rollins to leave that part out of her books, as the muddled discovery of it would be a real headache. Tolls, taxes, emissions tests, and God knows what else. Still, it might not have mattered even if she had, since one of the things her mostly fanciful series got the rightest was this. Muddles never pay attention to anything but themselves, and the ones that do look around are dismissed as lunatics. The network of people, network of highways disguised as hedgerows and used by magical people, preposterous. And it was, but that didn't make it any less true. The hedge was a special variety. In addition to containing a form of mass transit, it produced leaves in the shape of letters. These letters, read in the correct order, formed words, and it was said that each hedge had its own unique story. Each fall, a masterpiece fell. For each spring, new chapters sprouted. These stories didn't grow in telling, they were told in the growing. This way, Barry said in the leaves, and they arrived at the entrance of the hedgerow. Barry pulled off the cape, and Lon lifted some outer branches to reveal a good-sized opening. Some muddles saw them appear out of thin air, but chalked it up to the undercooked day-old centaur rolling in their bellies. Thanks, Lon, Barry said as he ducked inside. Lon followed. They suddenly found themselves in a room much bigger than the hedgerow, about as big as the Grand Central Station, if you've ever been there. Barry always enjoyed the illusion when he made the shift. Most magic was pretty utilitarian, shabby even, but this was different, impressive. The effect of the sparkling lights peeping through the roof and massive branches and the greenery made one feel as if they were snuggled under a Christmas tree, getting sticky sap in their hair, ready to dodge the falling ornaments. At each corner of the square room there was a line of toboggan-like vehicles, two-seater, red two-seater, and the front one in the front, one in the back, with a vertical lever in the front for steering and inclination control. A queue of magical, semi-magical and wannabe creatures stood waiting for their turn in the toboggan rank. Somebody would get into the toboggan, slide out of the tunnel-like opening into the chamber wall, and the next group would get in and do the same. It always reminded Barry of an amusement park ride. The pair walked up to a line under a large branch reading South-East Portal. Shuffling in behind the zoot-suited centaur, who twirled his long watch chain and tapped his hoof impatiently. The line moved slowly but steadily, and soon Lon and Barry were climbing into their toboggan. "Watch your step getting in," the conductor said. The man's nose looked like it had been partially eaten away by some disease, and the rest of his face, while present, was similarly unwholesome. Barry didn't like the looks of him, or the toboggan either. It was very old, rusty, spotted with crude flimsy patches and streaked with scorch marks. There was a big hole in the floorboard, and it looked like what looked to be a used condom in the back seat. The interrobang on Barry's forehead throbbed for a saucy samba of pain. He hesitated. Should he ask for another toboggan? Step in, got a whole line of people behind, the conductor said, flashing a gaped grin that Barry thought was evil. An image of this man flashed through his brain, scraggly, unshaven, wearing only a knee-length nightshirt and a nightcap, and the man danced in the moonlight around a massive bonfire of books. Barry's books. The shirt read, "I hate Barry Trotter," in large black iron-on letters. Cavorting demonically in Barry's mind, he ripped off the shirt, howling like an animal, revealing a grisly tattoo on his chest. A picture of him, Barry, with a traffic sign like a circle and a diagonal line through it. "I don't think we should take this." Overcome by pain, Harry swooned. "Your friend seems to have fainted," the conductor said. "I'll help you load him in." Lon and the creepy transit officer dumped the limp Barry into the back seat. Lon assumed the controls, and the toboggan zoomed into the tunnel, leaving the ghastly laughter of the conductor behind them. The branch over their head read, "You'll be sorry," but only Lon was awake to read it. Barry came to, and was immediately confronted by his worst nightmare. Lon at the wheel of a major conveyance. Lon's brain injury had robbed him of any perception of speed or momentum or balance. Also, he was a little bit blind, even though he never admitted it. "Lon, look out!" Barry yelled as they narrowly missed a bum sleeping it off against the wall of a tunnel. Copies of the Daily Soothsayer went flying. "Lon, let me—" "Huh? No, Barry!" Lon bellowed as he was touchy about things like this. "I can drive! I can do it!" "Listen, Nano-Brain." Barry reached for the wheel. "No, I can!" With a shrug, Lon threw Barry back. Barry gave away about 50 pounds of bulk to the red-haired quarter-whip. The toboggan was careening on and off the path, scraping against the walls of the hedge, sending a flurry of leaves and twigs flying. A branch smacked him in the head and broke off. It read, "Boy, are you in trouble." They were going much, much too fast, even though the passageway was completely flat. Pushing the lever forward magically increased the incline of the slope, increasing the vehicle's speed. Lon had the lever jammed as far forward as it would go. Barry covered his eyes and prayed. Something zinged past his ear. He looked down and saw that it was the rivets of a large patch of the floor of the toboggan were popping from the vibration. With every bump, tree root, unlucky squirrel, another drunk, the sled gave a violent shudder, and various holes became a little wider. Lon seemed totally unconcerned, singing his favourite song, Do you know the Muffin Man, the Muffin Man, the Muffin Man? Barry spotted something to his right. There, perched on the top of the back seat, was a gremlin, green-skinned, yellow eyes, and chuckling malevolently. He was taking real pleasure in Barry's terror, leering evilly. He pointed at Barry, then drew a long talon-like finger across his own throat. The gremlin was predicting the near future and relishing in it a lot. "Why, you motherfuck!" Barry lunged at him, but just before this book could contain serious profanity, the fragile network of patches holding the sled together finally cracked, and the toboggan began to separate. Barry grabbed the back of Lon's seat and held on for dear life. Just as his strength was beginning to fail, the contraption was about to fall in two. They slid into a stop in front of a small sign reading Hogsbleed Station. Chagrined, the gremlin smacked his fist into his palm and disappeared. "I love to drive," said Lon. He looked back at Barry, just as the whole back end collapsed. "Ooh, Barry broke the sled," he said, getting out to do a little hopping dance. He pointed and sang, "Barry broke the sled, Barry broke the sled." Happy to be alive, Barry crawled queasily over to the exit. End of chapter 3. Chapter 4. A Visit with the Headmaster. The hedgerow dumped them out on Crowley Avenue, Hogsbleed's notorious strip, a collection of bars, gambling dens, and houses of spectacularly ill repute that slumped like the police line-up through the middle of the malignant town. Any vice, no matter how nasty, could be satisfied here, for a price. It was a great favourite with the rougher run of the Hogwash students, so it was a rare Sunday morning that Halfwid didn't have to make the trek into town to post bail for the motley collection of chewed-up scholar ruffians. The rumour was that the town jail had a special student section. Barry had always been too scared to find out, and besides, his fans took care of him. Ahead of them, a clot of erythromancers, clearly blitz, were arguing over the future, getting ready to brawl. "You couldn't predict Christmas if it gave you a calendar, punk!" Hogsbleed was a big convention spot, and no matter how respectable the group was, regularly this burg invariably brought out the worst in them. "Let's cross the street," Barry said to Lon, who was mesmerised by the profusion of neon and flashing lights. "What's satire on satire action?" "Satire on satire action?" Yeah, Lon asked. "I'll tell you later," Barry said, stepping over the shards of broken Butterborn bottle. Just walking on the strip made him feel soiled. They finally got to the Corleone Street and took a left. Almost immediately, the atmosphere changed from actively evil to simply lawless, and Barry was glad for the improvement. They immediately saw a sign for where Ermine taught, St. Hilary's. This was a good thing, since Barry had twisted his ankle a bit during the toboggan crash. "Pull down your cap," he told Lon. "I can see your hole." "Whoops," Lon said. "My brain gets hot." There was a jingle bell at the end of each dual cones, which jingled with every step. It quickly became irritating, but Barry had trained himself to block it out. Jingle, wince, as the pain shot through Barry's ankle. Jingle, wince. They turned into a narrow lane and saw a squat-like building, tidy in that compulsive English way, but obviously long past time for demolition. A sign near the door clearly read, "St. Hilary's Academy for the Marginally Magical." A struggling institution that had no money for expensive anti-muddle spells and enchantments of a place like Hogwash, it relied on the ancient gambit of hiding in plain sight. So far it had worked, or nobody had cared. St. Hilary was one of about 100 schools put up in the 50s after the ministry decided that places like Hogwash were snobbish and elitist. Now that house elves did most of the menial jobs, thousands of people were free to aim higher. Every wizard or witch, no matter how talentless or clearly unsuited, deserved magical instruction. It was a noble idea, but in reality such schools were merely underfunded, crumbling, holding pens for students destined for a TV-sodden life of obesity and squalor on the dole. St Hilary's was the most famous of these schools, since a student last year broke into his father's wand cabinet and went postal. Lon and Barry opened the door and were buffeted by the distinctive perfume of secondary education, a stomach-churning melange of fried food, disinfectant and too sweet scents, favoured by old ladies, and airborne chalk. Taking shallow breaths, Lon and Barry walked down the main hall and entered into a room marked Headmaster's Office. They were startled to find the disembodied head of a puffy, smoke-haired man levitating some feet about a desk strewn with papers and a large speakerphone. A luxurious pair of mutton chops jutted from both jowls and acted as hairy ailerons. What? Behind him was a picture of St Hilary, the dumpy patron saint of backwards children everywhere. But Headmaster, government regulations require that the school be free of pixie dust. It causes cancer, and in rats, the speaker squawked. The head swooped down and yelled into the speaker, "Well, when we start educating rats, I'll be sure to call." He gave the lusty series of coughs, the kind that pulls stuff up from deep down. But Headmaster, St Hilary is the most infested place we've ever encountered, the concerned governmental voice said. "You're putting your students at risk." Barry thought he would have been quite distinguished looking in a porcine way if he had a body. "Sir, apparently you haven't heard. Here at St Hilary's it's the teachers who are at risk. Good day to you." Coughing violently, the head hung up the phone by slamming his forehead down on the console. The force left him momentarily dazed, and he wobbled in air before addressing his visitors. "Gentlemen, I am Benjamin Folks Ptarmigan." What? Benjamin for Folks Ptarmigan, whatever. Headmaster of this god-forsaken educational sludge pit. He had a red mark on his forehead. "What can I do for you?" Lon began to speak, but Harry leapt in, since there was no telling what might emerge from that addled half-canine brain. "Mr. Folks Ptarmigan, we're from Hogwash." Folks Ptarmigan's eyes narrowed with immediate cupidity. "Fine school, what I wouldn't do just to have half of their budget. A villa in Mallorca, perhaps, or just a Greek island. We're on urgent business for the school, and one of your teachers, Ermine Cringer, is a former Hogwesian, and we'd like a word or two with her, if it wouldn't cause too much trouble." Barry could see Folks Ptarmigan's mind working, quid pro quo, with as much emphasis on the quid as possible. "Certainly, Mr. Barry Trotter." Barry extended his hand. "And this is my associate, Lon Measley." Lon waved. "Hiya." "Not the Barry Trotter, I trust?" "Yes, sir." The head beamed even more. "I've read all your books." Folks Ptarmigan's grin reached an alarming proportion, and his iris was well wetted. "Such interesting, lucrative adventures you've had. I trust this is your latest one?" Barry didn't like the way this was going. "Sort of. I mean, not really. Those books were mostly bullshit." Folks Ptarmigan realised he'd overreached. "Of course, they always are. Now, Miss Cringer." The head whipped around and looked at the clock on the wall. Barry and Lon got a fine view of this thin, dandruffy back fringe and some of what he thought the wind during this brisk pirouette floated down slowly. How did he comb it? Barry thought. Lon didn't think anything, as was his wont. What? "Miss Cringer is just finishing up her last class of the day. It will be over in 15 minutes. "Great. Can we wait here?" Folks Ptarmigan smiled his oily smile. No, no, my dear Mr. Trotter, this isn't hogwash. Just barge right in. In addition to not being very magical, our students aren't very scholarly. They will welcome the interruption. The head zoomed over to the bookshelf, grabbed a red binder with his teeth and yanked it out, sending it to the floor. He descended, opened it, and flicked through the pages with his moist tongue. Yeah, vagina, Folks Ptarmigan said as he flipped. He made a sour face. The ink tasted foul. She's in room 207. Oops. Lon had just broken one of the headmaster's desk toys, and Barry always took such incidents as a clear sign to get out. Thanks very much, Mr. Folks Ptarmigan. We'll try not to disturb her class, Barry said, turning towards the door. Don't worry about it, Folks Ptarmigan said, zooming up to eye level again. Happy to do a favour for the great Barry Trotter. Sure you'll do the same for me someday. Barry reflexively felt for his wallet. Barry and Lon mounted the stairs and padded down the hall. Each footfall sent clouds of fine white dust into the air. Mortar, plaster, pixie dust. Unlike the first floor, which was simply smelled weird, this one showed that the entire building cried out for immediate demolition, with extreme prejudice. They peered through the window of room 207. There was Ermine in her element, behind a desk, telling other people what to do. In an exaggeratedly dull white blouse, beige skirt, and matching corduroy jacket, she stood in front of the most lifeless class Barry had ever seen. The stupidity seemed to come off them in waves. What was wrong with Ermine's hair? Barry thought. The answer was that the attempt at straightening her unruly locks was growing out, creating an effect that can only be called Einsteinian. Barry and Lon opened the door silently, waving at Ermine, and slipped into the two desks in the back row. Lon was much too big for his, and he knocked it over with a clatter. Sorry, he mouthed silently as every head in the class turned to stare. Class, these two teachers from another district. These are two, rather. They're here for a visit. Proceed, Sally. You were telling us the answer to question 5. To question 5. Ermine said patiently. How does a panther repel a dragon? An elfin, frizzy-haired blonde girl in a green jumper spoke. The panther chases away the dragon by giving a great belch, Sally said, by rote. The dragon cannot stand the smell. Correct, Sally. And who knows the question to question 6? So who knows the answer to question 6? Not many of you got this one right. Trevor? Barry shuddered inwardly as the insipid dork boy gave the answer with a superior smirk. A finer argument for corporal punishment had never graced a classroom. Question 6. The dung of which bird is good for eye trouble? Answer, the caladrius. I read that right. I'll stick with my specs, thanks, Barry thought. Lon had given up on trying to force his large body into the desk and was sitting cross-legged on the floor. Excellent, Trevor. Thank you. Ermine glanced at the clock. Drat, we're running late, so I'll give the rest of the answers, but before I do, I want to tell you that I was very unhappy with the performance of the class on yesterday's test. Now, all you have to do is read your bestiaries here. It's not difficult, nor does it take any magic, but you must apply yourselves. Lazy and unmagical is no way to go through life. Okay, question 7. What animal does the lion fear? Answer, the cock. Sniggers danced throughout the classroom, including from Lon. Ermine shot him a dirty look. Question 8. How does the hyena lure its prey? Answer, it mimics the sound of a human vomiting and sobbing. Question 9. How do cranes fly in blustery weather? Answer, they eat quantities of sand and small pebbles to give themselves ballast. Barry heard some student mutter bollocks. Good for you, he thought. Question 10. How does the beaver avoid capture? Answer, when pursued by a hunter, it will rip off its testicles and hurl them at its assailant. A student said, Trevor's already done it, and several others laughed. Ermine tapped her ruler on the lectern. That's enough! Barry recognised the last gasp of efforts of a young teacher trying to keep control of these giddy moments before the bell rings. Just because we have guests, that's no reason to act up. Suddenly the class exploded into laughter. Some of them pointed at Ermine, who looked down. A student had made her shirt invisible. Well, aren't we clever, misusing our paltry knowledge as usual. Take a good long look, Mr. Palaver. You're going to pay for it. You might as well get your money's worth. Faced with her teacher's nakedness, some students blushed. However, a few shadow-jowled boys looked unashamedly, appraisingly, and Barry felt bad for Ermine, having to deal with such a jaded bunch. She ejected the student with businesslike aplomb. Her shirt slowly faded back into view. Now for the extra credit question, and since none of you got it, I'll have to read it myself. Everybody knows about the jaculus, a flying snake that throws itself at its prey like a javelin. A hand shot up. It's like a spear. The hand dropped. Yes, but wait to be called on, Murphy. Now, for extra credit, name 2 other interesting facts about serpents. Obviously, there could be any number of these, but a few are: before drinking water, snakes spew their venom into a hole. A snake will never attack a naked man. If a snake goes blind, it can cure itself by eating fennel. If a snake drinks the spit of a fasting man, it dies. And finally, if there's a type of two-headed snake, there is a type of two-headed snake that can roll like a hoop. The bell rang. Ermine shouted over the class, "Read the section on fish for tomorrow." There was a groan. "There will be a quiz." There was a bigger groan, and Ermine walked over to Barry and Lon. "I saw a hoop snake once," Lon told her excitedly. "No, you didn't, Lon," Ermine said. To what do I owe of this hideous intrusion? I mean, unexpected pleasure. If this is about being behind the magic, the answer is still no." "Nice to see you too, Ermine," Barry said. "It's kind of a long story. Is there some place we can go to talk?" "The last time you said that to me, Barry Trotter, I ended up with a rippled blouse and shoes that smelled like vomit." "I don't remember that," Barry said. I'm not surprised, Mr. Purple Jesus Punch," Ermine said with a sigh. "Follow me, we'll go to the lounge." Moments later, the 3 were sitting in uncomfortable plastic chairs in a smoky, dingy room. Is there anything more depressing than a hackneyed motivational posters? If so, Barry didn't want to know. "Coffee?" Ermine asked, brandishing a pot. Nobody accepted. She poured herself a styrofoam cup of acrid sludge, and the consistency of maple syrup. "I'm an addict," Ermine said cheerfully, acknowledging that anyone who would willingly drink what she had just poured herself really was a slave to the demon bean. She put the pot back and tapped the side of her cup with her wand. It lightened a few creams worth. She sipped, and Barry massaged his ankle, which was feeling better. Lon was drawing his name in a pile of sugar. "So what's up? Is he who smells acting up again?" Ermine asked. "Nah, Valuemart has nothing to do with this," Barry said. "Or maybe he does, I don't know." After he had explained the situation, Ermine stirred her cup of muck a bit and said, "So you want my help?" "Yes, Lon's nice and all loyal, but well, you know. A crow could beat him at Scrabble." Ermine said, I'm to be the brains of the operation, is that it?" Smiling, she calculated a bit. "Actually, I do have some vacation days. I may regret this. I always do. But what the hell?" Relieved, Barry said, "That's great, Ermine. It'll be just like old times." Ermine smiled a little less. "Not quite, Barry. Not everyone is a brand name adored by millions, you know. Some of us have to work for a living." Barry was in a familiar bind. He wanted to explain that he didn't have any money, that he'd just gotten a bit at the beginning and then a little more every time he talked to an author. Oh, and there was the endorsements, but those all got cancelled after the Value Martin acne attack. Yeah. For details, see the 4th book in the series, Barry Trotter and the Acne of Fire. Still, this pride-like... Excuse you. Still, this pride-like being considered a rich guy. My price is pay off my student loans, Ermine said. My parents work for the National Health and I need all the money I can get. Ermine's parents were holistic dentists, and the pickings are slim for dentists who refuse to remove a tooth from its natural ecosystem. Picking up the spirit, Lon chimed in. Yeah, Barry, I want $5. He was ignored. Barry panicked. But, Ermine, I don't. Then I can't. Be reasonable, Ermine. I am being reasonable, Barry. Shut up. She cracked each knuckle slowly. Barry recognised this gesture from many earlier times when Ermine had somebody, usually Barry, by the mangrapes and was squeezing. Okay. Got a plan? Don't I always? Barry said. We're going to kidnap J.G. Rollins and hide her someplace. If they don't stop the movie, we'll turn her into guacamole. Ermine made a face. That's a little bloody-minded, don't you think? J.G. has always struck me as a reasonable sort, so let's just find her and ask her nicely. And if she doesn't agree, then we kidnap her, Ermine said. But there'll be no guacamole-ing. That's just as bad as Lord Valuemart. Ermine raised her glass to drink. Suddenly she screamed, throwing her cup on the floor. What? Said Barry. Barry and Lon exclaimed, as Ermine ran around the room, spitting and wiping her mouth furiously. She pointed at the coffee cup. She gave a gag and sprinted out the room as fast as her sensible shoes could carry her. The boys looked down into the styrofoam cup and saw an ear so pallid and desiccated it must have come from a corpse. Not only was the coffee undrinkable, it was full of dork magic, and now somebody knew their plan. Angrily, Barry grabbed the cup and yelled into it. Go tell Lord Valuemart he smells like bad Chinese food. And then he poured it down the sink. End of chapter 4. Ready? Thank you very much for joining me, everyone, and have a lovely evening and enjoy your weekend.